Chapter 5. After what was probably the best brunch I'd ever experienced, I hadn't experienced very many official brunches, Pinky and I bid farewell to the Apple family. Applejack told me I was welcome back any time, and he even told me about a couple of special seasons Sweet Apple Acres experienced. One was Zap Apple season, when the orchards were blessed with the rarest apple of all, the Zap Apple, which was made into a very delicious jam. The other was cider season, where the acres churned out barrel after barrel of homemade apple cider, which was then sold at 2 bits a mugful. The bits were small gold coins that constituted the staple currency of Equestria. I told Applejack I wouldn't miss either for the world, should my stay last that long, and was given an enthusiastic farewell from Applejack, her siblings, and her grandmother. Pinky was a mare of her word, and had directed me back into Pointville before we made a stop at a very colorful and ornate building in the middle of town. The newly painted sign read, Carousel Boutique. So I take it this is where Rarity lives? Yep, she's Ponyville's #1 fashionista. I've never been much of a judge of good clothing, I said. Too true. I hated shopping when it came to clothes, especially if I was in the company of someone who actually had a mind to purchase. They always seemed to take forever, even when they said they only needed a minute or something like that. Drove me nuts. You don't have to be silly. That's her job, said Pinky. Now come on, she shouldn't be too busy. She hopped inside as if she'd been expected, the door making a gentle ring from the bell overhead, which was obviously a signal to alert the proprietor of customers. I followed her in and found myself in a large room full of equine mannequins, mirrors, and silk curtains. Some of the mannequins were bedecked with dresses of a wide variety of fabrics and colors, some decorated with feathers or sequins, and nearly all of them bestowed upon with at least one type of gemstone. It was all so posh, and I bet dollars to donuts the owner, this Rarity, would be just the same. Oh, one moment please, I'll be right with you. The voice that spoke was a woman's, very elegant with the merest trace of an English accent, indicating a sophisticated upbringing and manner of living. In a twinkling, Pinky and I were approached by a unicorn who could be none other than Rarity. She was pearl white, or even marshmallow white, her mane and tail a deep shade of purple, both done in elegant curls. She had dark blue eyes with very pronounced eyelashes, as well as light blue eyeshadow. She had the slender, curvy hip figure of one who would have made it big as a runway model. At any rate, she was quite beautiful. Her cutie mark was a set of 3 blue diamonds, in the shape of playing card diamonds. Hi, Rarity, chirped Pinky. Hello, Pinky dear, said Rarity. Good to see you. And who might this... She stopped short, gazing up at me. Her irises shrunk to mere pinpoints, and she let out a loud "Wah!" of alarm. I was scared that I actually spooked her, but she said in an aghast voice, My goodness gracious, darling! Whatever have you been through? Just look at that hair! My hair? A creature Ponyville has never seen before steps into your shop, and the first thing you notice is my hair? I ran one hand through it. It was true that my hair had been growing out lately, and since I run out of the hair gel I usually use to tame it, it was one big jet black mess. It must have looked worse from my having lain down in the grass and from running with Pinky. Not only that, but my jeans were grass-stained, and the gray t-shirt I was wearing was wrinkled and spotted with sweat. It's no wonder she looked so freaked out. I must have looked like a hobo. Oh, right. Listen, if you want, I'll just go and... Go? Oh, no, don't carry on that way, said Rarity hurriedly. I wasn't trying to make you feel bad, darling. I was going to say that, if you were willing, it's nothing I can't fix. I stared at her in astonishment. You mean a haircut? You'd do that for a perfect stranger? And a human, no less? But of course, she said with a twinkle of enthusiasm in her eyes, and giving her curls a prim toss. This is a rare occasion. I've never had the honor of helping a human client. It was hard to tell whether or not she was speaking out of personal interest or a sense of business. Either way, she was offering, so who was I to refuse? Well, I guess it wouldn't hurt. Wonderful! Come this way. She led us into an adjoining room, which seemed to be a salon. There were several sinks and mirrors, swivel chairs, hair dryers. and shelves laden with innumerable bottles of different hair and beauty products. She sat me down in one of the chairs, and before I knew what was happening, a barbering cloak lifted all of its own accord and fixed itself around my neck, fastening by itself. I was quite startled by this, as well as seeing a comb and a pair of scissors lift into the air as well. I was about ready to jump out of my chair and yell something about ghosts. With what I'd seen so far of this world, I was ready to believe that ghosts could very well exist. But when I looked closer, I saw that they were surrounded by a light blue glow as they floated. I looked at Rarity, and the mystery was solved. Her horn was glowing the same color, a gentle blue. So this was what unicorn magic looked like. I actually thought it would have been invisible to normal eyes. "Is something wrong, dear?" she asked. "No, nothing," I said. "Just kinda caught off guard. I've never seen unicorn magic at work." "Never? But where do you come from to not know unicorn magic?" "He came from the sky," said Pinky. "The sky had a baby!" Rarity gave her an odd look, just as Applejack had done. "I see. Well, it doesn't matter, I suppose. How would you like your hair done?" She levitated a book of hairstyle samples over to me for my perusal. Well, I should say main style, if I want to be accurate. Still, the way ponies did up their mates in Equestria wasn't too different from how we humans do it back home. I had to be careful about where my eye lingered, especially on the more outlandish ones, because I bet anything Rarity would think I wanted one of those. At last I saw one similar to the haircuts I usually got. Short, boyish, easy to spike with hair gel. "Something like that," I said, pointing to it. She peered over my shoulder to see what I was indicating. "Excellent choice! A nice summer cut coming right up. It would certainly suit you just fine." She began running the comb through my hair and snipping away at it with her scissors. Pinky sat on her haunches beside me to watch. "Now, why don't you tell me a bit about yourself? If I'm not mistaken, you were the one making quite a scene in the town square earlier. It quite drove me out of my mind as I was trying to work." "Guilty as charged, I suppose. My name's Dave." "Dave," she said, mulling it over. She then nodded with a smile. "Not a bad name. Not very equestrian, but it's short and simple. I'm Rarity, or Miss Rarity if you prefer, proprietor of Carousel Boutique, where our fashions are chic, unique, and magnifique." "Very clever. So I take it fashion designing's your passion?" That was almost a dumb thing to ask. It was like asking a thief if he liked expensive things. A blind amoeba could have picked that up as soon as they walked into this place. Rarity, however, didn't mind the obviousness of it. "Very much so. It's simply divine, Dave, to know that after hours, even days of toiling away the sewing machine, you created something remarkable, beautiful, and built to last." She said this with a fond sort of zeal. In the mirror, I could see a dreamy look in her pretty eyes. "It's not that I think it's not a good profession," I said warily. "It's just that clothing isn't really my niche." "No, I suppose not," said Rarity in a regretful tone. "It's a shame that men are never as enthused about making a good appearance. At the most, all they do is slap on any old t-shirt or jacket and be done with it. It's a crying shame, really." "But don't ponies usually go around without clothes?" "Of course, but my point still stands. Why, I can keep Spike in my shop for as long as his little heart desires. But as soon as I begin the topic of smartening him up, he makes a beeline for the door." She sighed. "Oh, boys." "Spike? He frequents your boutique?" "Certainly. Can't seem to stay away for too long." "But with him being a dragon, aren't you worried that he might, singe one of your designs?" "Oh, certainly not," said Rarity. "Spike is a wonderful, well-behaved boy. He would never be so careless. I've seen full-grown dragons before on the other hoof. Perfect brutes they are when they're older." "It's okay, Rarity," said Pinky. "I've already told him about Spike." "Oh?" "Pinky's been a very helpful tour guide for me," I said, winking at the pink pony, who beamed. "Really? That's splendid to hear," said Rarity, smiling. "If you're new to Ponyville, the best pony to turn to is Pinkie Pie." "Aw, shucks, Rarity," said Pinky with a touch of red to her cheeks. Yet another vouch for Pinkie Pie's reliability to our newcomers. Just who was this pony? Rarity's hooves, I should say magic, was very skillful. It felt almost exactly the same as if a human barber were working on my hair. As she went on, she made idle chit-chat about what had happened to her recently, when so-and-so, or what's-her-face entered her boutique. And if you would believe it, she actually had the nerve to say my peacock feathers were dyed. My set of authentic, rare peacock feathers, donated from the royal gardens, dyed? Why, I'd never heard of such a thing. The very nerve. So then I said... I couldn't find myself able to keep track of her gossipy rambling, so all I could do was add uh-huhs, or mm-hums, or oh reallys, which seemed to satisfy her. Pinky was sitting with her eyes wandering around the room, probably lost in her own thoughts. I glanced about the room myself, and my eyes fell on a framed photo containing 4 unicorns. One was unmistakably Rarity, smiling rather embarrassedly, hugging a tall, strongly built stallion with a brown mane and mustache. Across from him was a pink mare with a purple beehive of a mane, and she was hugging a little snow-white filly with a fluffy purple and pink mane, with a smile so big it was liable to break the boundaries of her cheeks. "Is that your family?" I asked. Rarity stopped chatting and looked up, somewhat startled, as if terrified of the prospect of their dropping by. "What?" She then saw that I was looking at the picture, and a look of relief came over. Oh, yes. That's me with my father, mother, and little sister, Sweetie Belle." I couldn't help but chuckle as my gaze lingered on the widely smiling filly. "She's adorable," I said. Rarity smiled gently. "She is, truly. She's such an innocent, sweet-natured darling. A bit rambunctious, perhaps, and there are times when she can be a handful, but I wouldn't trade her for anything in the world." "Siblings," I chimed in. "You can't live with them, but you can't live without them." "Exactly." Sweetie Belle. I knew I heard that name somewhere before. Applebloom said she was one of her friends. She's a... what was the name for it? Cutie Mark Crusader. Yes, indeed. I can't even count the number of times those little scamps have been in the boutique, looking for new ways to earn their cutie marks. If it keeps up, I may need to look up a good child-proofing spell. She said this with just a hint of exasperation, but I could tell she couldn't really blame them for just being kids. Her bringing up cutie marks reminded me of the stories I'd heard already. I wondered if it was untoward to ask for such a thing from someone as refined as Rarity. "Rarity?" "Yes?" "Just out of curiosity, how'd you find out your true calling?" Rarity paused. "You know, how you learned that you were destined for fashion designing." "You mean, how'd I earn my cutie mark?" "Yeah," I said apologetically. "I mean, you don't need to tell me if you don't want to. It's just, I've heard Rainbow Dash and Applejack told me how they got theirs, and it got me sort of interested on the subject. I don't know if it's rude or unusual to ask, but..." I was cut short, as both Rarity and Pinky giggled. "Oh, darling, there's no need to be so apologetic. You sound just like Fluttershy." "Fluttershy?" I looked at Pinky, but she seemed to guess what I was going to ask. "Don't worry, she'll be next on our agenda," she said with a smile. "In any case," said Rarity, "there's something wrong with that sort of curiosity. I'd be glad to tell you." And so Rarity, resuming her barber work, dove into her own cutie mark tale. It seemed that even as a filly, she had harbored a great interest in fashion design, and had even been commissioned to make the costumes for a school play. However, she was nothing short of a perfectionist, and no matter what she made, she wasn't satisfied, and was desperately trying to find what it was that would make her skill complete. Suddenly, her horn suddenly began dragging her along by its own accord. Unicorn horns can do that, apparently. And Rarity, figuring that unicorn magic doesn't happen without a reason, felt sure this magnetic abduction would lead to her destiny. Which it did, eventually. What was it? A rock. No, I'm not kidding. Little Rarity's horn had dragged her miles and miles into the middle of nowhere to a rock. The poor girl was going to blow a gasket when a loud explosion startled her, and the rock before her split open, revealing something inside. "And you know what that something was?" asked Rarity. Ooh, rock candy?" Pinky asked excitedly, bouncing up and down on her hooves. Rarity laughed lightly. "No, Pinky," she said, and Pinky sat back down, looking somewhat disappointed. "Dave, what do you think?" I cast my mind around for an answer, wondering what on earth she was expecting me to say. And then, I remembered the designs I'd seen upon entering, and was sure they had some kind of connection. "Well, judging from how you design your fashions," I said, "I'd say that boulder was a geode full of precious gemstones." Precisely! I had never seen anything quite so beautiful in my life. It was then that I realized why my hornet led me to that spot. It was my destiny to use those gems in my work. So I took as many as I could back with me, and reworked them into the pageant costumes. Needless to say, the performance was a tremendous success. My teacher was happy, the parents were happy, the children on stage were happy, and I was happy. On top of all that, I had earned my own cutie mark. She turned slightly to let the reflection of those 3 diamonds on her curvy flank show in the mirror. I'd wonder why all of your designs had that same motif, I said. Is it, what's the term? In vogue? Oh no, darling. The more bedazzled ones are for special clients, or for formal occasions, such as a ball or even the Grand Galloping Gala. The Grand Galloping Gala? What's that? You've never heard of the Gala? Asked Rarity, scandalized. Why, it's only one of the most prestigious events in all of Equestria. A grand ball to end all balls. Both she and Pinky looked somewhat wistful at this description. Have you ever attended? You really seem like a pony who fits right in with the social elite. It's so sweet of you to say that. I have attended once, but it wasn't quite for me. So I'm content with merely designing ensembles for the gala to deliver to the attendees in Canterlot. I raised an eyebrow. Canterlot? Great, more pun-tastic pony names, I thought. Goodness, darling, you've got much to learn if you don't even know the most basic elements of equestrian culture. Well, excuse me for being new, I thought to myself. Canterlot's Equestria's capital city, and home to the royal throne, where Princess Celestia watches over our land. There's that name again. I heard someone mention it before, but who's Princess Celestia? What's she like? Well, I can't speak personally except for 1 or 2 occasions. She's very noble and benevolent, I can say that. If you want to know more, I suggest asking Twilight. She knows more about her than any of us. She does? How so? Oopsie doopsie, said Pinky. I guess I never told you. Twilight's the princess's best student. Student? I asked, astounded. You mean she studies directly under royalty? What an honor! Yeah, it's made her super smart and super good at magic, too, said Pinky, bouncing around so much she almost upset a stack of shelves full of hair products. Rarity righted it with her magic as Pinky grinned in a sheepishly apologetic way, the unicorn casting her something like a warning look as she reset the bottles. We all owe our friendships to Twilight. If she hadn't moved here to Ponyville, we might not have truly connected. And if not for Rainbow Dash. But she was cut off. Pinky was gesturing to her in a singularly forceful way that I couldn't quite make out. Rarity seemed to comprehend, though, as she nodded and winked. What are you two hiding? I asked in a banteringly suspicious way. Nothing, said Pinky teasingly. You just had to find out for yourself. Aw, come on, Pinky. You agreed to tell me about Ponyville and now you're going to keep secrets from me? It won't be as much fun unless you work it out for yourself, countered Pinky. Birdie, can't you talk some sense into her? Sense? Into Pinkie Pie? Asked Rarity in a would-be incredulous way. Then she laughed. My dear, that's like asking Applejack to dress up on Sundays. Can't be done. All right, you two, be that way, I said in a defeated way meant to be ironic. Girls, I added, just as Rarity had with the opposite gender word. Both Rarity and Pinky laughed again, and I couldn't help joining in. Dave, you're simply too much, said Rarity. She set her scissors in coma side and, putting a hoof to my shoulder on one side, rested her cheek against my own on the other side. We'll get on fine, you and I. I couldn't agree more, I said. For someone so high class, she was very good-natured. She even smelled nice, like an exotic perfume. Well, I think that should do it, she said, moving away and producing a small hand mirror. I was surprised. I'd been so taken up with our conversation that I hadn't noticed her work. My hair looked just as it did if I'd asked a human barber to give the exact same cut I requested. Rarity certainly had talent. How does it look? She asked. I turned around in my chair to face her, took her dainty hoof in one hand, and kissed it as a gentleman would a woman's hand. I couldn't have asked for finer, Miss Rarity, I said. It must have been a really hammy display, but it was all in good fun. Rarity giggled and turned red at the cheeks. Oh, stop it, she said. With her magic, she whisked the cloak off of me and began dusting the loose hairs off. And don't worry about payment. This one was on me. Are you sure? I asked a little surprised. Indeed. Think of it as a little welcome to Ponyville gift. Well, gosh, thanks, Rarity. My pleasure, dear. Don't be a stranger now. After such a reception, I certainly won't, I said, standing up. Pinkie joined me by my side. I gave a low, gracious bow to the matron of the boutique, which she reciprocated in a like manner, and Pinkie and I exited, my head all in a whirl. Chapter 6. Well, that was interesting, I said as Pinkie led me along. What was? I always thought upper-class people were more snobbish and condescending, but Rarity was really charming. Well, she can be kind of a drama queen, Pinkie admitted since we were out of earshot. And she's really fussy when it comes to dirty stuff, but she's a great friend. I can certainly see that. So, who's this Fluttershy you're taking me to? Besides Twilight and Spike, she's the last of my bestest best friends for you to meet. Oh! She stopped and looked at me, as if she had said something she shouldn't have. But I didn't mean she's my least bestest best friend. Relax, Pinkie, I get what you mean, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I actually did. Good, she said, relieved. She's so sensitive. She might take it the wrong way if I said that where she could hear. Aw, really? I kind of know the feeling myself. You do? Then maybe you two will get along just fine. Pinkie had led me out of Ponyville once again, and now we were at the edge of a massive, dense forest of trees. There were a few cawing birds floating above, and a stray cloud here and there. What's that? The Everfree Forest. We never go in there if we can help it. Why? I asked somewhat pensively. What's wrong with it? It's got a bunch of kooky spooky stuff in it. That's what's wrong with it, said Pinkie, turning sharply to face me. She reared up and placed her hooves on my chest. The plants grow, animals fend for themselves, and the clouds move, all on their own! She leaned in so close that her snout was pressed against my nose, her large blue eyes gazing straight into my own brown ones. And that's bad? I asked, nonplussed. That's not even the worst of it, she said, getting off of me. There's scary creatures in there, too, like manticores and parasprites and cockatrices. A cold chill ran over my limbs, and my heart skipped a beat. Manticores? Cockatrices? Like those creatures in mythology? They had those kind of beasts and dragons to deal with? I guess this world wasn't as completely cutesy as I'd imagined. Do these monsters ever leave the forest and attack anyone? I asked, trying to sound casual, though I must have been doing a poor job of it. Nope, they're fine as long as they get to stay in the forest. Well, good. They can keep it as far as I'm concerned. That's the spirit. Now come on, Davy. Fluttershy's cottage is just near the edge. I'd started walking, but stopped again. Whoa, back up, I said. A few seconds later, I wished I hadn't said that. She did back up, literally, only stopping when her rump collided with my stomach. Is that far enough? She asked, tilting her head back to look at me. I sighed wearily. Yes, I said. What I meant was, are you telling me this Fluttershy, who's so sensitive, lives at the edge of a place everyone avoids? Yes, sirree. What sense does that make? I asked, almost shouting. I know it sounds kind of weird, but, well, you'll understand when we get there. With that, she continued on, me still in a state of bewilderment. At last, we came upon a stone path leading up a hill. There were several birdhouses lined along it, as regular as street lamps. There was a twittering of birds and the chatter of squirrels in the air. The path led up to a quaint two-story cottage, one that looked straight out of a fairy tale. In fact, I was half expecting Snow White to come parading out the door, followed by 7 dwarfs and a bunch of woodland animals. Instead, there seemed to be a bit of activity in the grass close by. Pinkie motioned for me to keep quiet as we tread along, and I saw why. Several woodland creatures of all types were gathered together. Rabbits, squirrels, chipmunks, butterflies, and a colorful array of birds. Seated in front of them, smiling placidly, was a Pegasus pony, who I guessed at once was Fluttershy. Her coat was pale yellow. I'd venture to say cream or butter yellow myself. She had greenish blue eyes, and her mane and tail were very long and the same shade of pink as Pinky's coat. It was a sort of shrinking violet hairstyle, I'd say, the sort a shy girl would have to hide her face behind. She was slender and delicate looking, almost like a fawn, though she still had the curves of a mature young mare. Her whole self seemed to emanate an aura of tranquility. I can honestly say that when I had heard of her before seeing her, I had no idea she would have been so cute. Her cutie mark was no surprise either. 3 pink butterflies, a perfect symbol of being at one with nature. I had no desire to interrupt the tender scene I saw before me, but Pinky was much more tactless. "Fluttershy!" she said quite loudly. Fluttershy gave a jump, and her little animal friends scattered. She looked up, and at first seemed glad to see Pinky, but then her eyes fell on me, and those sea-green pupils contracted to terrified pinpoints. With a squeak, she spread her dainty feathered wings and tore past us, zipping into the cottage and slamming the door behind her. I stared at the door, startled for a moment, then shot a disapproving look at Pinky. "What?" she asked innocently. "You didn't have to scare her like that." "Me? I didn't scare her. You did." "Not before you yelled her name while she was just sitting with her forest friends." "Did I really yell it?" asked Pinky. "Trust me, a bullhorn was no match for you," I said dryly. "Well, don't worry. I'll coax Fluttershy out." She stepped past me and rapped at the door. "Fluttershy, come on out! I just want to introduce you to my friend." As she was talking, there was a faint sound, like the squeaking of a window shutter from behind the house. Pinky was still persisting in talking through the door, so I snuck around the cottage to look, and unexpectedly found myself eye to eye with the timid Pegasus. I gave a shout of surprise, and at the same time, so did she, and she ran off again in the opposite direction. Pinky had heard our yells, and turned just in time to see Fluttershy zoom past again. "Fluttershy, come back!" Pinky called, hopping after her. Fluttershy paid no heed, and instead ran full speed over to a large chicken coop that stood at the back, fenced off where the edge of the forest was nearby. There were a few hens gamboling around outside, which scattered and squawked as Fluttershy ran past, up the little ramp, and headlong through the little door. There was another chorus of startled squawks from the chickens inside. Pinky and I stopped outside the coop. How in the world she got inside was baffling to me, as, slender as she was, it was still quite a small aperture. "Really, Pinky, let's give it up," I said. "I'm just terrifying the poor thing. She'll have a heart attack if we keep this up." "She just needs to get to know you better," she said, and started making her way up the coop's ramp. Are you sure that's wise?" I asked warily. "That door looks pretty small." "Well, how else am I going to get Fluttershy to come out?" she asked, as if it was obvious. She stuck her head through first. "Hi, Fluttershy!" In answer, there was a squeak, presumably from Fluttershy, though I couldn't discern what she said afterward as she spoke so quietly. "It's okay, he's not going to hurt you. Now come on, let's get you outside." As she said this, she began working her way inside, but I knew it wasn't going to work. Like I said, she wasn't really fat, but she wasn't nearly as slim as her other friends. I could see her stomach wedge itself into the little hole. Her back hooves dug against the ramp as she tried to push herself inside, but for a little while, that didn't look like it was going to happen. I was reminded irresistibly of the story of Winnie the Pooh, when he got himself stuck in Rabbit's front door, and upon reflection, those were similar circumstances. Pinky had recently had a big meal, and was now trying to get through a hole much too small for her. I was almost compelled to call her Pinky the Pooh, but that probably wouldn't have helped the situation. However, her stomach did manage to slide through, only for the pink goofball of a pony to come to a stop at her rump. "Ugh!" came Pinky's voice again. "I don't think your coop door wants me to come inside, Fluttershy. Maybe things would be too crowded in here with you and all your chickens." Fluttershy had said something else that wasn't audible to me, followed by Pinky replying, No, it's okay. Just need a little more effort." And she resumed trying to cram her way inside. I sighed and rolled my eyes at how obtuse she was being, and decided there was nothing else to do but just sit and wait for the silly pony to do what she had set her stubborn mind to. So I took a seat on the grass to wait. Thankfully, the day was getting on, and wasn't as hot as it had been. A few minutes later, from behind me, I heard a creak of wood and a pop that told me Pinky had finally gotten herself inside the chicken coop. How the heck she was going to get out again, I had no idea. At the same time, I felt something nudge my leg. I looked down and was surprised to see a little brown rabbit gazing up at me, twitching its nose. It was probably because I'd been sitting so still. "Hello, little fella," I said gently. I raised my hand to pet it. Naturally, it ducked from my touch at first, but then gratefully accepted the stroking I gave its furry head down its back. I've never actually petted a rabbit before. Weird to think the first would be in a world of ponies. After some time, it seemed Fluttershy's little entourage, encouraged by my gentle treatment of the rabbit, came to sit by me. I flinched instinctively when some of the birds alighted on my shoulders, but they merely sat to look at me. I was quite flummoxed to be given such attention from these animals. I never had such an opportunity before, especially considering how these are all creatures known for being skittish and timid. There was another creak of wood, and I turned to see the front half of Fluttershy sticking out of the coop door, her hooves pressed into the ramp in a way that told me she was being pushed out against her will by Pinky. Luck wasn't with her, however, as there was a bump, and she toppled out onto the grass. She sat up, a bit dazed, then saw me among the animals and gave a little gasp, her eyes wide. She came over to me swiftly, looking at me intently. "Hello," I said. She remained silent. "I'm sorry if I scared you. I didn't mean to. And please don't be mad at Pinky. She just wanted me to meet you. I'm Dave." She looked at me a little while longer, and then, "I'm Fluttershy." Her voice was very soft, barely louder than a whisper, but very gentle. "It's very nice to meet you, Fluttershy," I said with a smile. She seemed to hesitate, then gave me a small smile herself. It had to be one of the most endearing sights I had ever seen. It wasn't one of those side-of-the-mouth smirks, but a sweet little smile in the middle of her face, complimenting her doe eyes very nicely. I felt like I could just give her a hug, but I feared she wouldn't like that. I had no idea you had a way with animals," she said, looking at her critters. "Oh, this? Completely by accident," I said. "I've never had this much contact or experience with these sort of animals, but I can guess you have." "Oh, yes. It makes me so happy to be with them." "So you're an animal caretaker, then?" "Mm-hmm." She stopped, and seemed actually surprised with how verbose she had started to become. I didn't blame her. If I had suddenly went from terrified of a perfect stranger to chatting with them freely, I wonder if something had gone wrong with me as well. "So you're a Pegasus that lives on the ground. Does that happen often?" "Oh no, not very. Most Pegasi live up in Cloudsdale." "Yeah, that's what Rainbow Dash said." She looked up at the mention of the fellow Pegasus. "You've met Rainbow Dash?" "And most of your other friends, in fact. Pinky's been giving me the grand tour." "Oh, that sounds wonderful." "Speaking of Pinky, it baffles me how she was able to get inside your chicken coop." "I was surprised myself, but I'm more worried about how she's going to get back out." At this, I looked up, and saw exactly what I had been expecting to see. Pinky's front half was sticking out of the door, and she was having great difficulty in extricating herself. I looked at Fluttershy, who seemed quite bemused by what was going on. Our eyes met, and we both laughed. She had a very light, heartwarming giggle that suited her nicely. "I'll be right back," I said. The animals seemed to guess that I was about to get up, and they shifted over to their pony friend, allowing me to stand and walk over to the crazy earth pony. She looked up as my shadow fell over her. I knew I couldn't really be mad at her, but I still crossed my arms in a would-be, "what have you got to say for yourself" way. She just smiled imploringly up at me with the biggest puppy dog eyes I'd ever seen, and at last I broke off my act with a chuckle. "Come here, you," I said, leaning down to grip her hooves. It took a few moments of tugging, but eventually she came popping out, the force of it throwing me onto my back and her on top of me. I looked up and found myself nose to nose with her. She grinned. "What am I gonna do with you?" I asked. "Hey, I'm supposed to say that," she teased. "You're the fish on a walker." "That's fish out of water, Pinky." "Same thing, silly," she said, giggling. Dang it, why was it so hard to stay mad at her? "Oh my, are you two alright?" Fluttershy asked, coming over. "We're fine," I said as Pinky got off to let me up. "Pinky just needs to drop a couple of pounds, I'd say." "What? No way!" said Pinky, pouting and putting her hooves to her hips. Yes way, I said, giving her belly a playful poke, which set her giggling again.
Aw, come on! Where would the cupcakes go then?
She threw her hooves around me, caught in the fit of the giggles at her own joke. All I could do was smile and put an arm around the silly pony. I turned to Fluttershy and saw her trying to stifle a laugh. "What's so funny?" I asked. Fluttershy jumped, as if she'd been caught doing something naughty.
Oh, nothing, she mumbled. I just thought, that is, well, you two seem so friendly together.
After spending a whole day with this crazy pony, it's hard not to be, I said. Pinkie seemed to recognize this was a compliment, and nuzzled me from under my chin. I swear this pony was like an overly affectionate cat. So, Fluttershy, you live right at the edge of the Everfree Forest. Does that bother you?
Not at all. The creatures inside it know to stay within its boundaries. We never have an invasion from something that lives in it.
And are there really manticores and cockatrices?
I'm afraid so, she said regretfully.
Have you ever had to go inside it?
Once or twice. It wasn't exactly pleasant.
I can imagine. But you seem to have a love for all creatures great and small.
Oh, I do, she said, a contented smile crossing her face. Do you?
Me?
Well,
I do like a lot of animals. Just not snakes or a few choice insects.
Oh, I see. It's all right. Not everyone can like every animal. Even I'm afraid of a few.
How'd you find out animals were your calling in the first place? It doesn't seem like a likely thing for Pegasi.
You mean, how'd I earn my cutie mark?
Yes, but you don't have to tell me if you don't want to.
Oh, I'd love to tell you, but only if you want to hear it. It's not very exciting.
I don't mind. I just don't want you to if it makes you uncomfortable.
It doesn't, really.
Suddenly, Pinkie burst into a fit of laughter. We glanced at her.
What's with you?
I asked.
You two are so alike! It's too funny!
Fluttershy and I looked at each other, somewhat startled. She had gone red in the cheeks. Don't be ridiculous, Pinkie, I said, but Pinkie was too busy lying on the grass on her back, kicking her legs as she laughed. Go ahead, Fluttershy, I gently urged the timid pony.
All right. Well, you may not think it, but when I was young, I was very shy and not a very good flyer.
Oh? I asked. I had a feeling she had always been shy and more at home on the ground, but I decided to humor her. She had attended summer flight camp to help strengthen her flying skills, but unfortunately she hadn't made very much progress. In fact, it had gotten to a point where the other foals started to pick on her, and even made up their own chant. Fluttershy, Fluttershy, Fluttershy can hardly fly. I swear, kids can be so cruel. Just the thought that this poor, innocent little pony had been taunted and teased just because she wasn't as good as the others really made my blood boil. One day, she was being tormented as usual by two bullies, when all of a sudden another filly had stepped in between them, one that Fluttershy had known by sight and name, but wasn't personally acquainted with. Rainbow Dash. My mouth fell open in surprise. So it was you, I said.
Huh? What was me?
She asked timidly.
You're the filly Rainbow Dash mentioned in her story. I had no idea you two had such a close connection. She told you that?
Fluttershy looked embarrassed, but she was still smiling.
Yes, Rainbow Dash has always been there for me. There have been times when I made her impatient, but she's also been very supportive, just like back then.
So, just as Rainbow had described in her story, the daring little flyer challenged the boys to a race, Fluttershy acting as the flag waver. However, after she started them off, they hadn't noticed that, in zipping past her, they knocked her off the cloud she'd been seated on, and... No. That was too unbelievable. Wait a minute. Are you telling me you fell out of the sky? I pointed upwards. All the way from somewhere up there? I then pointed to the grass. Down here?
Yes, said Fluttershy meekly. Like I said, I wasn't a strong flyer.
But how did... What? I spluttered. She looked perfectly normal and able-minded for someone who had taken a several-mile plummet as a filly.
Oh, don't worry. Luckily I was caught by a roaming cloud of butterflies.
Well, I said after a pause, not quite sure what to make of that. That was lucky.
Very. I was so amazed. I'd never been close to the ground before, and butterflies never fly high enough near the clouds. I was so overjoyed by the nature around me. Squirrels in the trees, cute little bunnies, birds flying free, bees with their honey.
I wonder if she meant to rhyme like this on purpose, or if it was by accident.
And then, all of a sudden, there was something like a very loud boom, and the sky was all lit up.
I'm detecting a pattern with these stories, I muttered to Pinky. She smiled, but in a way that told me she knew more about it than she let on.
The poor little animals ran away, but I managed to coax them out. Somehow, I was able to communicate with them in a way no pony else could. Soon after that, this happened.
She looked at her flank where the butterfly tree was situated. You're well deserving of it, I said.
Thank you,
she said, a slight pink coloring her cheeks. Suddenly there was a thumping noise, and Fluttershy looked down. A white rabbit was tapping her side with his little hind foot, looking somewhat miffed.
Oh, how rude of me. Dave, I'd like you to meet Angel Bunny. Angel, this is Dave.
Hi there, I said genially. The rabbit looked at me distrustfully, but gave a curt nod to acknowledge my greeting.
Please excuse him, said Fluttershy apologetically. He's not very good with strangers.
The rabbit had pulled out, seemingly from nowhere, a very minute day planner, and was showing it urgently to Fluttershy.
What is it, Angel? Something about today?
She paused, then gasped.
Oh, goodness! Thank you, Angel. I'd almost forgotten.
Angel gave a sigh of relief.
Dave, I'm very sorry, but I promised to visit Mother Robin to watch her eggs hatch. They're scheduled to today.
Well, that's quite an occasion, I said, not really seeing how it was, but again deciding to humor her. I wouldn't dream of delaying you.
Oh, but are you staying in Ponyville long? I'd love for us to meet up again.
It looks that way. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time. She smiled warmly.
Wonderful. It was so nice to meet you, Dave, and thank you for putting up with me.
She held out her hoof, and I clasped it warmly in my hand. No worries at all, Fluttershy, I said, smiling in return. It was very nice to meet you as well. With that, after I let go of her hoof, she turned to follow Angel, who had gone on ahead and was waiting for her. She stopped to take one last look at me, and I saw the gentle smile was still on her face, all trepidation gone. Pinky and I watched her until she was out of sight.
Isn't she just the nicest pony you'd ever met?
Asked Pinky. More than nice. She's so polite, so considerate of others. You're lucky to have such a wonderful friend.
Thanks, Davy. I'm lucky to have you for a friend,
she added, giving me a little bump with her side. Right, I said with a chuckle. Now, I guess that just leaves your friends Twilight and Spike for me to meet.
Yep, we spent a lot of time today, so maybe we can see if they're ready for a visit now. Come on, Davy, vroom vroom!
She hopped to her hooves and started off at her usual bouncing gait, me following close behind.